Happy Tuesday, NCAA men's basketball fans. The tournament is on its way. We're down to our Sweet 16. Exciting weekend of basketball. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about our Sweet 16 challenge. Let's talk about our Final Four picks here on the TrogCast. Two really old guys talking basketball. Before we get to that, we'll welcome Jim Reaker in. Jim, how you doing on this gray, rainy day here, the second day of spring in Cincinnati?
I'm doing great. March Madness, we've both survived one weekend, and we get a little break here now, but things will start to heat up again on Thursday.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It turns around. So very, very exciting weekend of basketball. It wasn't, to be honest with you, it wasn't as exciting as ones in the past. We didn't have a lot of buzzer beaters. We didn't have any massive upsets. But we had some really, really good basketball. So reflecting upon that, going down to the Sweet 16, how did you see it? Was this just sort of business as usual with a few surprises, or kind of indicative of the year we've had where people have said any one of X number of teams could win the championship?
Well, I have right here, you know what I thought the biggest surprise was? That there was no, as you alluded to, big surprise. I kept waiting for it to happen. No buzzer beaters, no 15-2. As we talked last week, I kind of thought, the way this season had gone, all the upsets we had, I remember a couple weeks when we were talking like 15 of the top 25 had lost. I just thought it was going to be crazy that Sweet 16 might have a 15, a 14, maybe a 12, and it really kind of went almost true to form, true to seed for the most part. Although there were a couple mild upsets, and really the upsets, if you want to call them upsets, most of them kind of happen in the second round. Usually things kind of settle down by the second round after a volatile first round. So this was, I think, one of the most different March Madness NCAA first weekend that we've had in a long time, because usually you're talking about that crazy game where somebody threw in a shot at the end and it was a big upset, and can you believe so-and-so, number 2 or number 3 has gone home. But really, the upsets, look at Middle Tennessee State. That was a 12-5, which is really the biggest upset per seed. But a lot of people had picked that because Middle Tennessee State, of course, beat Michigan State last year in the tournament, had a very good team. A lot of people were picking them to beat Minnesota anyway, like they did. Xavier, the 11 over the 6 Maryland, but a lot of people had picked that, talked about the experience of Xavier. They'd been there before, and they had struggled through the season because of some issues that we talk about a lot on our Razorcast. Can't wait for that on Thursday as we get ready for the Sweet 16. Probably the biggest two upsets really was a Michigan over Louisville. A lot of people had Louisville in the Final Four. Some people picked them as their national champion this year. Of course, that Michigan team, that's a story, going off the runway, going to the Big Ten, and then running the way through the Big Ten. Kind of surprised me. I thought they would run out of gas this weekend, but they seem to be playing very, very well. And then I guess probably the biggest upset, just because of the blue blood that went down and how it went down, was Duke losing to South Carolina. That was 65 points scored by the Gamecocks in the second half. Oh, and one other, is this an upset again? I don't know, Wisconsin over Nova. Wisconsin's, they got so much experience and they've been there before. And so that really wasn't, it was kind of a surprise, but that went down to the last shot. And that looked like it was going to be the one where maybe Josh Hart got that driving layup to fall and win it at the end, to survive, get through that game. That one you got to get lucky, but that didn't even go down. And so, again, the biggest surprise was there was no big surprise.
Yeah, I'm with you. You look at it, and you said last week, a 5-12 isn't really a surprise anymore. We had one of those, and we had a couple of 11 over 6s. But, again, not surprises. All quality teams. And when you look at it, in the round of 32, there were only 2 teams that had never cracked the AP top 25 in the season, and that was Michigan and Middle Tennessee State. And at one point, Michigan got as high as 28 in the voting. And of the Sweet 16 teams, all but Michigan have spent time in the top 17. And the lowest one of those was Florida, who only got up to number 17. South Carolina got up to 16. But all the rest of these teams almost everyone had spent time in the top 10. I think Butler only got as high as 11, but every other one, you got just about every team that was you got teams in there that were number one at one time: Baylor, Gonzaga, Kansas, North Carolina, Kentucky, UCLA as high as 3. So yeah, no real surprises, and you didn't expect many in a year where the parity is coming up. I'm with you that there was just some good basketball, some minor surprises. I said last week I thought Louisville was the weakest of the 2 seeds. So Michigan taking them down with the run they're on. I mean, this is a team won 4 in a row in their tournament and survived running off a runway and having to play in practice jerseys. John Balin's got them playing hot and brings the Super Soaker to the after game celebration. And it just comes to it, and we're going to talk about our conferences here in a minute, though, that we just sort of undersold the Big Ten and the SEC a little bit. They've got some strong showings going on here. So the nice thing is we'll be talking about our Final Four picks here in a minute, but there's a lot of strong teams there that could go to the Elite Eight or the Final Four. I think this weekend's games are going to be more exciting than last weekend's games, and that's talking about my 2 favorite games over the weekend were watching Rhode Island and Oregon. And I tell you, I mean, I had teeth in the game there because in our Sweet 16 challenge, I needed Rhode Island to beat them in it. And Rhode Island had it by 4 with less than 2 minutes left and fought Oregon tooth and nail. And then the other great game, I'm sure you were watching it because you had this as one of your walkouts, was Wichita State, Kentucky. I mean, just fantastic basketball down the stretch, as well as what you mentioning Wisconsin Villanova, which was a great game, and also the Northwestern Gonzaga game. So many of these games were just so well played and went down into those final minutes. That's where the excitement came from, not from the big upset or the buzzer beater.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, and I didn't realize that I guess that Oregon Rhode Island game spelled the difference in our Sweet 16 picks, our challenge.
Yeah,
gone the other way, you would have won it.
Well, we would have ended up tied after that one, but it just goes. First of all, it goes to show neither of us are really all that good. If we're going to talk about that for a minute, you got 9, I got 7. So we're not really all that strong. We had 8 of the same teams, and of those 8, only 5 made it. We both had Louisville, Duke, and Villanova going to the Sweet 16. And then with all the differences, it did sort of go back and forth, and with some very close games. I mean, you had Florida, I had Virginia, and that was probably the one game that didn't turn out the way anybody thought it would. That was the one blowout there. Neither of us had Baylor. We both had Gonzaga. You took Notre Dame. I took West Virginia and pressed Virginia, wore them down a little bit. You stayed with your Muskies, and I went with Florida State. We both had Arizona and Kansas. You had Purdue. I had Iowa State, which was another really good game. And it just goes to show, I think the only place we misstepped was neither of us chose Butler. Of course, you went with your real wild card there, Winthrop, upsetting Butler, and I went with Middle Tennessee State, which could have very easily taken that game from Butler. But that comes down to looking at our conferences and who's left, who looks the strongest. I mean, like I just said, obviously we've talked all year about the Big Ten and the SEC being down, but they've made 2 of the strongest showings here in the tournament. So with the groups that are left, who do you think has made the best show moving into the 16 before we go on to make our Final Four picks?
Well, obviously the Big 12. I thought they've the teams we expected to win are there. And I just saw Roy Williams on Mike and Mike this morning. He made a good point. He said, last year everybody was kind of down on the ACC during the regular season, and what's wrong with the ACC? They're not as strong as they used to be. and I didn't recall, but I think he said that 4 of the ACC teams were in the Sweet 16 last year. 2 actually made it to the Final Four, which have been North Carolina and Syracuse. And then people are like, oh, yeah, the ACC is they are really good. And then this year, of course, all along, we kept saying that the ACC was the toughest conference, 9, 10, 11, 12, how many are going to get in? Every week there were big upsets and teams are playing well. And now you turn around and you look and there's only one ACC team left in the Sweet 16. So, the point is that I don't know how much this says about the conferences versus each other. A lot of it's just, a couple teams got lucky or not lucky but played well and were able to win those games. The big 5 or 6 that we cover week in and week out are obviously the cream of the crop, as they have covered 15 of the final 16 teams, with Gonzaga, of course, being the only one not in the power conferences. So, again, yeah, it's a little bit of a surprise when you see that the ACC only has 1, and then, of course, the SEC, who we've kind of banged on all year, it's Kentucky and the rest. Well, of course, Florida and South Carolina played very, very well over the weekend, and they're in the Sweet 16, so giving them a little bit of pride. But, again, I don't know if any one of the 6 is that much more outstanding than the other 5.
Well, I would agree with you to a point with all of them when you look at it. And the ACC didn't do as bad. They were 6-3 in the first round, basically, and you count Wake Forest losing in the play-in game to Kansas State. It's just the second round where they faltered, where they were only 1-5. So they were there. They had the most teams in that second round, which makes a big difference. But right now, the conference to look at would be the Pac-12. They went 4-0 in the first round and 3-1 in the second. And you got to add in Southern California's win in the play-in game. So they really went 5-0 in that first round. And they've got 3 teams in there. And, they could very easily get all 3 teams in the Final Four. And I said earlier in the year, I was waiting for the Pac-12 to be relevant again, and we'll see after this weekend what that's going to happen. So let's talk about this before we go to our Final Four picks. What are the most enticing matchups here on Thursday and Friday before we get to the Elite 8, which will lead us to the Final Four? Of course, I'm sure one of the ones you're going to talk about is the fact that we're good friends and former coaches Chris Mack and Sean Miller, who used to coach at Xavier, are going to go up against each other. What are the games you're looking forward to on Thursday and Friday?
Well, the very first game, I think come Saturday morning, everybody will be talking about it, is UCLA and UK again. Because, again, there's so many future NBA players. In fact, the story will be I went to a Sweet 16 game and an NBA game broke out. And I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, and it's probably going to be one of those that swings back and forth wildly all the way through and might end with a buzzer beater or tip in, and this could be an overtime game. I just think it's going to be an entertaining game for those who like to see the basketball going up and down the floor very, very quickly, because as we know, they both play very up tempo, or they like to play up tempo. So there's not going to be as much defense played. And we remember the Bruins went into Rupp Arena, and I think the score of that game was something like 97-92. And I could see whoever wins this game actually maybe putting up triple digits on the scoreboard. That's probably the number one. And then right behind that, but I think more of a, I don't know, I want to say quality, but a more collegiate type game being played will be Kansas and Purdue. I think that'll be a very, very close game. Biggie Swanigan, I think, will do very, very well against Kansas. But, again, Kansas is playing well, and a lot of people say if you got 2 premier guards starting for you, that's the way to win a national championship. And, of course, Kansas has that with Devontae Graham and Frank Mason. So those are the 2 that I think will be the best games. I look forward to Wisconsin and Florida just because I think Wisconsin will do what they do. And they have so much experience. They've got a lot of players that have been there before. Remember, they were in the national championship just 2 years ago and made the Sweet 16 kind of as a surprise with their coaching change in the middle of the season last season. So, but again, we're going to be talking about UCLA, Kentucky come Saturday morning.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And people forget that it was a remake because not many people go into Rupp and take down the Wildcats and the Bruins did early in the year. And I would, Purdue's going to have to slow that Jayhawk team down, a team that's won by huge margins and just dismantled the Michigan State team that was starting to get in its prime and dismantled Miami. So the Jayhawks are running hot right now. So Purdue is going to have to slow them down, and I'm not sure that they can do that. And it just tells you the different style. You talk about UCLA and Kentucky might be in triple digits, and Kansas has scored 190. So you're going to have that kind of game in those two. And you look at the other side, which tells you how different styles can be. I mean, Wisconsin and Florida both won their second games with just 65 points against tough defenses. So it's going to be interesting. On top of what you said, I think another game to watch is going to be Gonzaga, West Virginia. If Press Virginia can disrupt Gonzaga's flow, and Northwestern just about had them, a shot here, a shot there. Of course, Gonzaga benefited from being out west and Northwestern having to travel. I don't want to get into the goaltending call and the officials and all that. It was obviously a goaltending, and Chris Collins got a technical out of it, but that was with 5 minutes still left in the game. There's a lot of things that could have happened. Northwestern had their chances. But Bobby Huggins' group, they just discombobulate you when you're out there on the court. And if they have one of their games where they can score, because that's always the problem with a Bob Huggins team, if they can score, that's going to be one to watch. It's not going to be pretty basketball. It's not going to be artistic, but I think it'll be fun to watch. And like we talked last week on our Razorcast, I think a lot of people, especially here in the Cincinnati area, are going to be looking at that Xavier-Arizona game. Sean Miller, gets that tab of one of the best coaches to never take a team to the Final Four. Could this be this year? And Xavier could be in their way. Xavier's taken them a couple of times in the past in the tournament. He and Chris Mack know each other so well. And could Xavier continue their run in what some people are saying is Chris Mack's greatest coaching year ever with what he's done with a team that not many people, just a month ago, we would have never thought they were going to be in the Sweet 16. And we'll talk a lot more about that, I'm sure, on the Razorcast. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts there. And, of course, that leaves out, Oregon, Michigan, North Carolina, Butler, which could be, Butler, many people are surprised to be there, but they are the 4 seed. So that one has gone, that whole bracket has gone according to seeds. And the only one that's thrown off the West is Xavier in beating Florida State. And the one that's a little discombobulated is the East. But they do have the 3 and 4 there. They've just lost the 1 and 2. And the only thing off in the Midwest is Michigan over Louisville. So we've got to go back with everything we've talked about. And it seems like they did a pretty good job of picking the seeds as things have rolled on. It will be an exciting couple of days of basketball. We'll be talking back here next Tuesday about our Final Four. Any final thoughts on that before we go to our picks?
Yeah, one thought. I just, again, listened to Roy Williams this morning, and he pointed it out that North Carolina, and it's been within the last 5 years, I think that one of them I know was out in Hawaii in a holiday tournament, and I can't remember where the other one was. I don't think it was a regular schedule. I think it was in some tournament, early season tournament, but Butler and North Carolina have only played twice and in basketball, and Butler's won both those games. So he said, we got our work cut out for us. And, of course, Butler, again, kind of like Wisconsin, plays that different style, defense, kind of slow you down and work for your shots and bleed the clock. So that could be a tough game for the Tar Heels. But right now I think the Tar Heels are playing very, very well, and the experience of Roy Williams in the tournament, I think, will play out.
Well, that's a nice thing. We do still have some coaches there that have won it all. Roy Williams in North Carolina, Calipari at Kentucky, Self at Kansas. Greg Gard, it's his first full year, but he's been there with Wisconsin as an assistant. Lots of great coaches in and teams, and we'll have to see how it goes. And speaking of coaches, something we'll talk about next week is, the coaching carousel has begun. A few things have already happened. The coach from Cal going to Mizzou, and the coach from VCU taking a job at LSU. And, of course, there's not a lot of big apples out there, but there is the one at Indiana with them firing Tom Crean. And, of course, that has caused a lot of speculation whether Steve Alford would go there, or can they entice Chris Mack or Mick Cronin out of the Cincinnati area because they know the area. So we're going to talk a little bit about the coaching carousel and that on Tuesday as well. And I know Jim, as an Indiana boy, will have a lot to say about that on Tuesday, but we'll give you just a quick minute here for any thoughts you might have there.
Yeah, the Indiana job, I've alluded to that all year, that I know the fan base has not been very happy there. Of course, I heard a commentary yesterday and kind of agreed with it that Indiana fans, even though he's been gone, I think they said 15 years, nobody's lived up to Bobby Knight's standards. And maybe some fans will never be happy unless Bobby Knight would come out of retirement and take the job himself. And, of course, we know that's not going to happen. One other, I just want to note that if you look at that West region, it's kind of interesting. You got three programs a la coaches who one of their sticking points is they haven't made it to the Final Four. You got Gonzaga and Mark Few with all their success, never been to a Final Four. Sean Miller, Xavier, and Arizona never been to a Final Four. Just Xavier, which have been to two Elite Eights, never making that next step. So that's going to be an interesting, maybe a first coming out of that region. And, of course, you got Bobby Huggins there, who did make it to a Final Four when he was, I think it was 1992 with the UC Bearcats.
And he made another one with West Virginia a few years ago. And
that's right.
What's going to happen. The Cincinnati connection helped the Bearcats in the first game where they had Oscar Robertson's retired jerseys shining down on them in Sacramento because the Sacramento Kings are the way it's morphed from the Cincinnati Royals, but couldn't get them past UCLA. You got the three Cincinnati coaches. It's just going to be fun. It's just a fun time of year on top of that with the NIT and teams showing themselves there. So we'll talk a lot about that. But let's go. Let's not leave them private this way. We can alternate any way you want, but why don't you pick a region and give us your first Final Four, and then I'll or if you want me to go first, so you have last pick, doesn't matter, and we'll alternate picks to see.
We can't have the same pick.
Oh, sure we can.
Because I'm not going to change mine. I have mine written down. So yeah, let's look at the East. In the East, I'm picking Wisconsin, and I alluded to again just because of the experience they have. They've been there before. They kind of went through a tough time there, but I believe they're playing their style of game again. And Nigel Hayes and Bronson Koenig, when those two are playing at their highest level, I think Wisconsin is very, very difficult to beat, just again because they play that slow-down style, defensive-oriented style, but they got a couple, and they can shoot the three. So I look for Wisconsin, even though they're an 8 seed, and some people say maybe that was too low of a seed for them, but that's who I'm picking in the East.
Well, if you watched them against Villanova, you would know, and Nigel Hayes made one of the prettiest moves ever down there on the baseline, taking people out and getting the reverse layup to put that game away. And of course, Nigel Hayes is still one of the best interviews in college basketball, going back a couple of years when he was just a freshman. I think this is the toughest one to pick because there's 4 teams. You got the 2 SEC teams in there as well, and the team has gone up and down. But so I've got to go on a hunch and be just a little different there. I'm going to go with Baylor, just because they don't seem to be talking about them. They've been solid. I think they can get past South Carolina. They play the type of game that will bamboozle them. But I'm with you. I mean, it could easily be Wisconsin. I think it's going to be Baylor versus Wisconsin in Madison Square Garden to see who goes to Arizona. Okay. After that, I'm going to go to the South. And this one is very intriguing because, again, it's followed form. It's got number 1 UNC versus number 4 Butler, and then number 2 Kentucky versus number 3 UCLA. I don't see Butler really being able to do anything against the strength of UNC, but I just think right now the team of the moment, and I've been down on them most of the year, and even Steve Alford, but I think that UCLA is the team that's going to come out of the South and get back to the Final Four. Now, it hasn't been that long for them because Ben Howland took them to 3 straight there just about 10 years ago. But then it'll just be whether Steve Alford can push them all the way. So the Bruins in the South. How about you?
I'm going to take the Tar Heels, and based on what I talked about previously, I think that UK-UCLA game is going to be one for the ages. But because of that, I think that may take a little too much out of the Bruins or the Wildcats, whoever wins that, and then I'm picking the Tar Heels to be able to defeat them on Sunday in the game to go to the Final Four. And again, Roy Williams, I think he's a great coach, and he's got a lot of talent there. And Joel Berry runs the show very, very well. If he's healthy, he was actually injured a little bit in the first round. They didn't even know if he was going to play against Arkansas. He did, of course, end up playing and made a big play when he forced that shot up, although some people thought he charged and got the ball up on the rim and it was tipped in. Big basket for the Tar Heels. But I'm going to go with the Tar Heels coming out of the South.
There's nothing that you said there that I can disagree with. It is tough to turn it around, and sometimes it's that gives you the momentum, and like I say, sometimes they're just beat up. So where do you want to go next? You got two regions.
Go to the Midwest.
In the West. You want to go to the Midwest?
Yeah, and I'm going to – I just changed this pick about 10 minutes before we went on the air. I was going to say Purdue. I'm a big fan of Caleb Swanigan. I think he's probably player of the year. And so based on that, I was going to pick the Boilermakers. But then I just got to looking at the depth and the experience of Kansas. And, again, then I looked at the scores. Purdue really had a couple. They didn't blow Vermont out. And, of course, Iowa State's a very good team. They struggled a little bit with them. So I changed my mind. I'm going to go with the Jayhawks. I think that, again, and Bill Self is a very, very good coach. I think he will get them through the Midwest region. Michigan, of course, is a sexy pick. I just keep waiting for them to run out of gas. And obviously, that didn't happen this last weekend, but that's a tough region. So I'm picking the Jayhawks.
And this is the first place where we're going to agree. In fact, in my bracket, I've got the Jayhawks going all the way. It's just as good as they've been quiet, but they're going there. I look for Bill Self to get his second. I don't see anybody in that bracket able to really win going away. They'd have to have a fantastic game. Oregon's hurt. Michigan's run is probably it's got to end sooner or later. They're a good team, but they're not good enough to get past Oregon. And I don't think they could get past Purdue again. Purdue's got something to do if they would win that. So Kansas there, which takes us out to the West. And, my pick there, and the thing that I would say right now, like we just alluded to, I would be happy with any 4 of these coaches getting to the Final Four. For Chris Mack, Sean Miller, or Mark Few, it would be their first one ever. Bobby Huggins, who, great article on ESPN a couple weeks ago where he just said, I'm doing it my way. I really don't care what people think or say. He plays a hard-nosed style of baseball. You can disagree with his lifestyle off the court and some of the things he's done, but he cares about his players and to get to his third, but I'm not going there. I really think this is going to be Sean Miller's year. He's got the group that can go inside when they have to. They're not as strong as they need to be, but I don't see anybody in this bracket that's stronger underneath except for Gonzaga, and they just haven't played that strong enough against overall teams. So I'm going with Arizona.
Well, I'm going to pick the Musketeers here. I don't know. I just get this feeling this is one of those times when the Musketeer magic is going to play out. And a lot of people talk about, of course, Chris Mack coached under Sean Miller for years at Xavier. They're very, very good friends. In fact, if you've seen in the interviews with him in the last couple of days, he says he hates the fact that he has to play this game because they are such good friends. He'd rather be playing against someone who he didn't know very well. But actually, I'm going to look at that as the advantage because, there's no secrets here about how they play the game and what they like to do, I don't think. So I've been very, very impressed because I'm going to tell you, I was half expecting the Musketeers to be able to beat Maryland, but after watching Florida State play that same night, I'm like, whoa, there's a lot of athleticism here. Of course, you covered the ACC, and I hadn't seen Florida State really play at all. And I knew they were very athletic. I know they're very talented, maybe a few future NBA stars playing on that team, but I'm thinking, how are the Musketeers going to keep up with this? Well, Mack had the perfect plan. He wasn't going to let them get out. And the Musketeers are playing some of the best ball. In the first half, they had maybe one turnover, and they were maybe missed 2 free throws. I just think everything's coming together. And the other thing is I think they're playing very relaxed because, hey, they're playing with house money, as everybody says. There's no pressure on them. Nobody expects them to win. And I think that really feeds into this team and allows some of the younger players, some of them have had to step up to just play with that loose feeling and enjoy it and play very well. So I'm saying the Musketeers, and that's a homer pick, so I'll be right up front with you. So if I'm going to make a pick that I can root for this
I was going to say to people, I'm shocked that the guy who bleeds blue is going to stick with his Muskies, but why not? You've ridden them this far. They did have a great game against Florida State. We'll see what happens there, or is it going to be, who knows who the champion's going to be? We haven't had a team lose in the final game and come back to win it the next year since Tubby Smith brought Kentucky in 1998, so it's been 20 years. So can UNC come back from that, or other teams that have been around? It's going to be another exciting weekend of basketball, not, the sunrise to sunset as it's been the past weekend, but we're going to have some fantastic games, and we'll talk about that and the coaching carousel next Tuesday on our TrogCast, and please join us this Thursday, where I'm sure Jim will have all kinds of more things to say about the Xavier run and the game against the Arizona Wildcats, and more things on the NCAA on our Razorcast with all things Xavier basketball. So that said, why don't we head on to our trivia and tidbit section?
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so we're in the regional final weekend, looking forward to the Final Four. So the first question, which alludes that there are more than one, the first question today is, which city has hosted the most Final Fours?
Which city has hosted the most Final Fours? That's a good one.
Thank you.
I would say, there's lots of options because one thing that people probably don't know is in the early years there weren't that many cities who did it. Now they go to the big basketball arenas and do all that. But in the early years, there was kind of like the NIT. They had it at Madison Square Garden a lot. There were a couple other spots, like I know Kansas City hosted it many times. The first one was in Evanston, Illinois. They haven't done that much. I think Louisville's hosted quite a few in the early years, not so many lately. And then with the big things, I know they're sort of rotating a lot. It's landed at Indianapolis, so it's kind of a hard one. So the most Final Fours, I think I'd have to go with, it's a tough one, but I'll go with Indianapolis.
You're incorrect. The answer, you did mention it, is Kansas City. Kansas City has hosted 10 Final Fours, but not one since 1988. New York City has hosted 7, Indianapolis 7, Louisville 6, New Orleans 6. And here's kind of a little bit of an explanation. If you recall, the NCAA headquarters used to be in Kansas City, and that's probably the reason why they've had 10 there. And, in fact, it's part of the agreement when they moved the headquarters to Indianapolis is Indianapolis will host one every so often. And, in fact, if you want to look ahead, of course, we're going to Phoenix this year, 2018 San Antonio, 2019 Minneapolis, 2020 Atlanta, and 2021 it will be back in Indianapolis. So good guess. All right, here's kind of an off question. Not that I would ever ask anything like that, but along these same lines, what is the largest city in the United States to not host a Final Four?
Largest city in the United States that's never hosted a Final Four?
Yeah, that is correct.
Well, since you allude to large cities, that sort of narrows it down. Indianapolis having so many, I'm going to take a stab at something close and say that Chicago has it. And not just because Chicago, they just don't, for years they didn't have that venue to do it. But just offhand, I'll go with Chicago.
Chicago has, and I think they're actually including Evanston as part of Chicago. Let me give you
Evanston. Ask the people from Northwestern. They would never claim to be from Chicago.
I'll give you a hint here. The reason why this city has never hosted a Final Four is because the state is actually banned by the NCAA from hosting Final Fours. That's your hint. Hello?
I'm here. Why would they ban somebody from having a Final Four? I mean, I know they've done it.
Go down that road. Think about that. Why would they ban an area from having a Final Four?
Well, I mean, recently they have the issues in North Carolina where they wouldn't have them there, but North Carolina has hosted a Final Four in the past. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can go with the easy one and say, Anchorage, Alaska, because they're not going to go there. But I know that's not it. So who is it?
It's Las Vegas, of course, not allowed to host because of legalized gambling.
Watch, that will change. That is going to change in the next 10 years. And when you look at it, they've got, and just to let you know, I mentioned it in an earlier cast, the Pac-12 had their conference championship there this year, and none of those teams is anywhere close to Las Vegas. So that makes sense.
I agree with you. I think we're looking at the NFL, who's possibly going to move a team there. Didn't have a team there for years for the same reason. I think online has kind of changed gambling, and it's territorial. You can gamble sitting in your
gamble anywhere. It's not. Not in Las Vegas to gamble.
And I think Las Vegas might be one of the biggest areas for the expansion of sports. I have one more. This is just a really off-handed tidbit that I ran across, as I always do, going through my research. But
because the others were so mainstream.
Yeah, they were compared to this one. The term, we use it a lot. Haven't used it as much this year, although we'll use the Musketeers as probably the one team left that can use this. The term Cinderella. When was that term first used, and who was it referring to? And the hint was it was an NCAA team, and because of their run in an NCAA tournament, it was the first time that the team was dubbed a Cinderella team. Do you know who that team was?
Did the team win it all as a Cinderella, or did they just make a run?
They won it all, and they were Cinderella. And I know you have a little bit of background in theater and movies and all that. I'll give you that hint. It has something to do with the movie Cinderella.
Had something to do with the movie Cinderella.
There's a connection to why it was this team.
Well, then I've got to go back. I've never heard it turned to it, but would it have been Texas Western? Because that would have been about the time the Cinderella movie came out.
Well, that's you're going down the right road. Except I'll give you this almost if you know, but Cinderella actually came out in 1950.
Oh, then that's the year CCNY won them both. But that would have been earlier in the year. The movie probably would have come out later. So the only one that was sort of off there was when LaSalle won it. Is that it?
No, you were right at first. It's CCNY, the City College of New York. And, of course, Cinderella coming out at that time, people dubbed them the Cinderella team as they started to go through the NCAA tournament. Of course, they were the ultimate Cinderella in that they won it all in 1950.
Great stuff, as always, Jim Reaker, digging in the archives, trying to rack my brain with good stuff. But it's good to know the history. We'll go on to our tidbits and make sure you join us on Tuesdays. We'll see how our Final Four picks lasted, and we can talk about this weekend in basketball, and join us on Thursday for our Razorcast about Xavier basketball. Some fun things going on here today, and one in particular I want to spend just an extra minute on. But it was in 1939 that Kate Smith first recorded God Bless America, and this has gone away a little bit with everything that's going on, but for many teams, they considered Kate's rendition of God Bless America to be a good luck charm, and it was in auditoriums and coliseums all over the United States for many, many years, especially with the Philadelphia Flyers as they made their Stanley Cup run. And it was in 1946 that Los Angeles team in the NFL, the Rams, signed Kenny Washington. And if you don't know that name, you should. He's the Jackie Robinson of the NFL, a guy who George Halas tried to sign in 1938, and the other owners wouldn't let him. He's part of a UCLA squad that won the Rose Bowl and had a great rivalry against USC on teams that included the John Ford actor Woody Strode, and Jackie Robinson played on that team. And many people felt that Kenny Washington was a better baseball player than Jackie Robinson, but he actually broke the color line in the NFL before Jackie Robinson broke the color line in Major League Baseball. And, of course, the NFL wasn't as popular as baseball then, so it didn't get as much play. There's a fantastic documentary out there called The Forgotten Four, which is about Kenny and his teammate Woody Strode and the two that the Cleveland Browns signed, Marion Motley and Bill Willis, and what they had to face. And if you wonder why there were four, well, the sad point is at that time you couldn't just sign one because somebody had to room with somebody, and they had to have two African Americans on the team, and they went through a lot to get there. And another bit of history, it was on this date in 1980 that President Carter announced that the United States was going to boycott the Moscow Olympics due to the invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviet Union. And, of course, things still going on in Afghanistan almost 40 years later. A lot of people, I had a friend from high school, unfortunately, didn't get his Olympic shot because of that. It's still a controversial point to this day, the politics in the Olympics. I want to spend just a couple of minutes here, won't even take that long, to talk about a very special person in Cincinnati history, and you won't know him. You know, talking about roommates, black and white, everybody probably knows the old film Brian Song with about Gale Sayers and Brian Piccolo and how they became roommates and friends on the Chicago Bears in the late 60s and what that meant to them. Another great story out of Cincinnati is Maurice Stokes. And if you don't know him, of course, the Royals haven't been in Cincinnati since 1971, but he was one of the stars of the Royals. He's actually drafted by the Rochester Royals before they moved here. The sad thing is this guy was considered somebody who could stand up to Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. The Royals lost him and probably lost their chance at games, but it was just a few weeks ago, just last week, that he played his last game ever. He had hit his head on the floor in the last regular season game on March 12th of 1958. Got up, they put the smelling salts in, put the fingers in front of his face and said, get in there. It was probably a massive concussion. He went on to play a playoff game 3 days later in Detroit got sick on the plane, vomited repeatedly, fell into a coma, and when he woke up, he was paralyzed. And this is one of the guys that could have been one of the greatest in the game. He is in the Basketball Hall of Fame, but that's not really the story. The story is the friendship that came out of it that erupted even before the Brian song, when his teammate Jack Twyman, very famous here in Cincinnati, at that time they had no insurance. There was no way for the Stokes family to take care of it, and Jack Twyman, who was, to get into the racial thing, he was a Caucasian. Maurice Stokes was African American, and Maurice Stokes had been a Rookie of the Year and a 3-time NBA second teamer. Jack Twyman actually ended up adopting Maurice Stokes so that he could go onto his insurance plan, and did God knows how many fundraisers. I remember attending a couple of these as a kid. It was memorialized in the movie from 1973, a couple of years after Brian's song, called Maury, with Bernie Casey playing Maurice Stokes and Bo Swenson playing Jack Twyman. Very touching film. Doesn't get on the air as much as Brian's song. Mr. Stokes passed away in 1970 with Jack by his side. They spent a lot of time together, and another reason for that is you may hear it. If you really go back, Jack Twyman was on TV for many, many years, but the NBA now has what they call the Teammate Award, and it's called the Twyman-Stokes Teammate of the Year Award, which recognizes the player that embodies the league's ideal teammate for that season. Fantastic story. Look into your history. Maurice played at St. Francis. Jack Twyman spent the rest of his time in the Cincinnati area until he passed away about a decade ago. So, fantastic story. And we'll continue to get to the trivia and tidbits and the history of the NCAA and basketball overall as we do our broadcast. So, Jim, we're on to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, good stuff there, Jeff. Learned a lot from you this morning. Hadn't heard much of any of that. So you're always, you of course are the Cincinnati historian here. So you get me up to speed. So yeah, looking forward to these games this week. Can I say what I usually say on Thursday?
No,
okay.
Can't be a homer on the TrogCast, but you're going to say it anyway. These Muskies through and through. Go and go, and we'll see what happens. We'll talk to you on Tuesday.
All right, we'll see you.